Some commentators have framed the enhanced games as similar to a medical or scientific trial. None of this is true for the enhanced games. As a result, it will not be possible to make any causal claims for performance enhancement or harm from this event, regardless of what the results show. If you promote high-level competition, where performance-enhancing substance use is not only allowed, but presented as being safe, this can create the impression that these substances can be used safely. Promoting the illusion of safe use at the elite level could drive increased uptake outside of elite sport, where the risks can be even higher. My research focuses on the psychology of doping and performance-enhancing substance use in sport and exercise contexts. I'm particularly interested in why athletes choose to use or not to use prohibited substances in elite sport, including the social, moral, and environmental factors that shape those decisions. I'm also interested in access to and effectiveness of harm reduction services for people who use anabolic steroids and associated substances in exercise communities. We know anabolic steroids can increase muscle mass, strength, and recovery capacity, which is why they're attractive to some people in competitive sport and fitness communities. We also have strong evidence linking their use to a range of physical and psychological harms, such as cardiovascular issues, hormonal disruption, and mood changes. What's less clear, though, are the combined effects of using multiple substances at doses far beyond those in medical contexts. We also have limited understanding of what leads some people to be more susceptible to these harms than others, even when they're using similar substances and doses. So while we understand the broad risks, the precise effects of real-world use remain difficult to quantify. This makes it very difficult to protect individual athletes from these harms, even when medical supervision is in place. So from a scientific and medical perspective, what are the potential risks athletes might face if performing in games that allow steroid use? From a medical perspective, the risks are substantial. These include increased risk of heart disease, liver damage, endocrine dysfunction, brain aging, and mental health issues such as aggression, depression, or dependency. There's also a competitive dynamic here. So if use is permitted, athletes are likely to feel pressure to escalate doses or combine multiple substances, increasing these risks further. Such competitions are also likely to normalize the behavior, which may increase the prevalence and scale of use in non-elite sport contexts too. So the issue isn't just individual choice, it's how competitive environments can amplify potential harmful behavior within and beyond the specific competition in which substance use is permitted. So what wider impacts could participation have for athletes and the general public in terms of health and understanding? Well, one important concern is how this might shape public understanding of risk. If you promote high-level competition, where performance-enhancing substance use is not only allowed, but presented as being safe, this can create the impression that these substances can be used safely. This perception could be particularly damaging beyond elite sport, especially in fitness and bodybuilding contexts, where increasing numbers of people are already thought to be using these substances. In those environments, the risk can actually be higher because substances are often of lower quality and there's often little or no medical supervision available. So, promoting the illusion of safe use at the elite level could drive increased uptake outside of elite sport, where the risks can be even higher. Some commentators have framed the enhanced games as similar to a medical or scientific trial. How accurate is this comparison? Well, in short, it's not an accurate comparison. Proper scientific and medical trials operate under strict standards, whereby participants are randomly allocated to groups and they are blinded to which group they're in. You also have a true control group for comparison to your treatment group. None of this is true for the enhanced games, where participants get to choose which group they're in, and the control group includes both natural athletes and those that have been prescribed performance-enhancing substances by their own doctors. Also, athletes in the group that the enhanced games will administer substances to will receive a wide range of different substances and dosages rather than a single substance and dose as you would normally see in a clinical trial. As a result, it will not be possible to make any causal claims for performance enhancement or harm from this event, regardless of what the results show. So, as we know, elite sport already involves pushing physical limits. How might the use of performance-enhancing substances change the nature of competition? Well, their use could shift the balance away from training, skill, and natural physiology towards pharmacological optimization. Success might depend more on access to substances, medical expertise, and willingness to take risks. That raises important questions about fairness and about what we actually value in sport, whether it's human performance within natural limits or something more technologically or medically enhanced. So you might ask, are there any credible scientific arguments that supporters of this model might point to? How are these viewed within the research community? Well, some supporters argue that a regulated and transparent system could reduce harm compared to underground use. Whilst there is some validity to this claim, you have to balance this against the number of athletes being exposed to the risk. A regulated and transparent system might reduce risks associated with black market use, particularly issues around contaminated, counterfeit, or poor quality substances. However, you have to balance this against the increased risk of much more widespread use of substances that we know can lead to a whole range of physiological, physical, and psychological harms. Supporters also point out that enhancement already exists in sport in other forms, like advanced nutrition or training technologies. However, the difference here is that these forms of enhancement are not linked with the range of significant harms linked to enhancement substance use. As such, we don't see this as a meaningful comparison. If this were approached as a formal medical study, what standards and safeguards would normally be expected? And how does this compare? Well, for this to be a formal medical trial, first of all, you would need a precise, testable research question, such as, does drug X at dose Y improve performance Z with acceptable safety? For the enhanced games, we don't have such a testable question. You would also need to demonstrate there is a genuine uncertainty about the risks to show the study addresses a clear knowledge gap. We know what many of the risks of these substances are, so this isn't in place either. You'd also need to have randomization of group membership, a meaningful and comparable control group, and blind intergrouping, none of which are in place. So without these safeguards, this study is purely observational and not a true trial. Ideally, you would also start with lower risk substances and have dose escalation designs akin to a phase 1 trial. Harm should be actively minimized, not just monitored, as appears to be the case here. The major financial inducements are also a major concern, as it undermines the possibility of truly valid informed consent. Finally, there would be an independent safety monitoring board in place, with predefined thresholds for the adverse events of interest. This again would move us away from monitoring more towards active participant protection. So what are the implications for clean sport and anti-doping efforts globally? Well, it could create real challenges. A high-profile event that permits substance use may send mixed messages about what's acceptable or even required for elite performance, potentially undermining existing anti-doping efforts. However, at the same time, I feel it's forcing a clearer articulation of why clean sport matters, things like fairness, athlete welfare, and the integrity of competition, and why we need to continue to protect those values moving forward.